what if the universe doesn't actually care if you're, a quote-unquote good person? Like, what if, mathematically speaking, being perfectly well-behaved and avoiding all conflict actually short-circuits the very fabric of reality?
I mean, it is a completely jarring thought, right? Especially considering how most of us are raised. We grow up with this expectation of, well, a cosmic report card.
Right, like an accounting system.
Exactly. An accounting system where morality is totally binary.
Yeah.
You have someone, plus 1 point.
Yeah.
You act selfishly, minus 1 point.
Yeah, we want our morality to be tame, I think. We want it to be predictable and heavily categorized so we know exactly where we stand.
We really do.
But today, for you listening, we're stepping into a world where that entire report card just bursts into flames. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking Eliphas Levy's Unit 7 on morality, which we've sourced from Ben Hod's curriculum on high magic.
And it is quite a ride.
It really is. And our mission for you today is to decode this really mind-bending 19th century framework because Levy treats magic and morality not as, a speaky parlor trick or a religious checklist, but as a literal physical science.
Yeah, he essentially frames it as a behavioral physics.
Yeah.
In his view, the universe doesn't actually want peace and quiet.
Right.
It absolutely demands friction just to survive. So he is taking the moral high ground and sort of dragging it all the way down into the greasy, sparking engine room of reality.
Which, honestly, if you've ever felt bogged down by those dogmatic rules about what's good and evil, this is going to be a massive paradigm shift.
Oh, absolutely.
We're taking the concept of evil as stripping away the guilt and looking at it as raw, usable energy. But if morality is a physical science to him, he must have a base material he's working with, right? Like a physicist has atoms. What does a 19th century esoteric philosopher use to build this universal engine?
So he builds it on what he calls the astral light, or sometimes the universal agent. And to really grasp this, we have to kind of strip away any modern New Age associations with those terms.
Sure, because it sounds a bit mystical.
Right. But Levy was writing in a very specific 19th century scientific context. Consider what was happening in the scientific community at that time. You have Newton's laws of gravity being well established, and pioneers like, Michael Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell.
Oh, the electromagnetism guys.
Exactly. They are discovering invisible electromagnetic fields.
Okay, so he's looking at actual physics breakthroughs, like invisible forces moving objects across a distance, and applying that scientific language to the soul.
That's it. He is attempting his own unified field theory, basically, but one that actively includes human consciousness.
Wow.
He describes this astral light as a kinetic electromagnetic ether that permeates everything. It's an ambient fluid. But his radical claim is that this energetic ether responds entirely to the human will.
So it's not just sitting there.
No, it is the plastic, moldable medium upon which all reality and all magic actually unfolds.
Okay, so translating this into a more modern context for you listening, Levy is basically describing a massive, invisible cosmic battery. But just like a car battery, it can't do anything with only one terminal, right?
Right, you can't just wire up a positive pole and expect the engine to turn over.
Yeah, you need a positive and a negative to get a spark.
It's a car battery, but with a twist. You don't just need the positive and negative terminals to create that spark. Levy views the physical Earth itself as the grounding wire.
The grounding wire, okay.
Yeah, the material world stabilizes the highly volatile nature of spirit through heavy resistance. In this system, resistance isn't a roadblock to power.
It's the point.
It is the only thing that makes power usable. If you don't have the intense tension between two opposing forces, you don't get life. You just get an inert, formless void.
But, recognizing that tension is really only half the battle, because if you just have two opposing forces pulling against each other equally, you aren't creating momentum.
No, you're just stuck in a stalemate.
Right. And Levy knew this, which is why he framed the mathematical solution to this cosmic battery, using the oldest gatekeeper in mythology, which is the riddle of the Sphinx.
Yeah, he uses this famous myth as a literal roadmap for the evolution of human consciousness. He writes this incredibly dense skeleton key phrase.
Oh, right, the math quote.
Yeah, he says, quote, "The material elements are thought of as 4, are explained by 2, and only exist in the end as 3.
Okay, let's break that down for everyone, because at first glance it just sounds like abstract arithmetic. How does this actually tie back to the Sphinx? Because the riddle Oedipus solves is about what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening.
Well, Levy, being the sort of esoteric saboteur that he is, completely ignores the biological answer about human aging.
Right, no babies and old men with canes here.
Exactly. He sees the morning, noon, and evening as a metaphysical sequence of mastering reality. Let's start with the morning, the crawling on four legs. The Sphinx itself is a composite creature, right? It's made of four elements: the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the human. For Levi, the four represents the dense physical world, the classical elements of earth, air, fire, and water.
The tangible boundaries we can actually touch?
Yes, and in esoteric terminology, this is often represented by the cross, the square, or the tetragrammaton.
Which is the four-letter Hebrew name of God, right? YHWH.
Right. Occultists view that as a formula for how divine energy casts itself down and locks into the physical soil. The four is the illusion of stability.
Ah,
When we are spiritually infants, crawling in the morning of our development, our physical senses demand these hard, absolute boundaries. We need rules and solid walls so we don't, slip into the terrifying abyss of the infinite.
right. We need the floor so we don't fall. But you can't crawl forever. Eventually, Levi says those four elements are actually explained by two. We reach the high noon of the Sphinx, standing on 2 feet.
This is his grand law of polarity. As you mature, you realize the four elements aren't actually separate, independent substances at all.
Okay, so what are they?
They are just varying expressions of two opposing primordial currents, the active and the passive, the light and the shadow.
Right.
Levi represents this, using the imagery of the two pillars of Solomon's temple, Jachin and Boaz. One pillar represents severe, active strength, and the other represents compassionate, passive establishment.
So to stand on 2 feet is to wake up and realize that the physical universe is born from this perpetual friction between these two opposites.
Precisely.
But again, this brings us back to the stalemate problem I mentioned earlier. You can't just stay in a tug of war forever, perfectly balanced between two pillars, just doing nothing. Which brings us to the evening, the 3. The old man walking with the staff.
Because leaving the universe at 2 results in mutual destruction or just, sterile stagnation. The 3 is the conscious solution.
And he pulls from alchemy for this, right?
It does. He borrows the triad of sulfur, mercury, and salt. Now, he obviously doesn't mean literal chemicals in a beaker.
All right.
Sulfur represents the fiery, active, expansive energy. Mercury is the cool, fluid, passive receptor.
Okay.
If those two just collide, they neutralize each other. But salt is the stabilizing third principle. It is the conscious base that allows the spirit and soul to actually solidify into something new.
So the 3 is the magus wielding the staff.
Yes,
Mhm.
it's the introduction of a conscious human will that forces those opposing currents to actually do work.
I love this. Think of it like learning to ride a bicycle, right? The 4 elements.
Wow.
That's the solid pavement you're terrified of hitting when you're a kid just starting out. You crave the stability of the ground.
That's a great analogy.
Right. And the 2, those are the left and right pedals. You have to constantly push them in opposite directions, creating friction and tension.
Yes.
But the 3, that's you, the rider. You are the third point, hovering above the pedals, providing the forward momentum and the subtle balance that keeps the whole system from just crashing down.
And that necessity of friction, the pushing against the pedals to keep the bicycle moving, dictates everything about human behavior in Levi's worldview. It fundamentally redefines the word morality.
How so?
Well, he actually looks at the Latin root of the word, which is mos. And mos doesn't mean goodness. It simply means habit, custom, or the natural temper of a thing.
So it's not a moral purity test at all. It's about figuring out how the machine of reality operates and acting in accordance with it.
Exactly. True morality in this framework is founded upon antagonism. The antagonism is the friction that keeps the roof of the universe from caving in.
Okay, but how does this behavioral physics play out in our actual lives, though? Because Levi illustrates this cosmic tug of war by entirely rewriting the most famous murder in biblical history, right? The story of Cain and Abel.
He does, and it's fascinating. He strips away the traditional Sunday school lesson, which frames the story entirely around petty envy over a sacrifice.
Right, the vegetables versus the sheep.
Exactly. And he re-engineers it as a clash of fundamental psychic forces. To do this, he looks really closely at the original Hebrew roots of their names.
Okay, break that down for us.
So Cain, or Cain, translates to a forge, a spear, or something acquired through fierce, striking labor. Cain represents the active, kinetic, disruptive, muscle-bound ego. He is the sulfurous force that forces its will upon the earth to build something.
Got it. So he's the guy doing the heavy lifting, the messy, aggressive drive needed to actually make manifestation happen.
Yes. And on the other hand, Abel is Hevel. This word translates to breath, vapor, vanity, or nothingness. Abel represents the passive, receptive, ephemeral idealist.
Wow, so this completely reframes the murder. If it's not about God liking Abel's sacrifice better than Cain's, what is actually happening between them in Levi's eyes?
Levi sees the murder as a desperate, clumsy attempt at cosmic equilibrium. He points out that Abel oppresses Cain with his vaporous moral superiority.
Oh, wow.
Think about how this works in real life, right? The passive armchair critic who never builds anything can utterly paralyze the active creator with impossible standards of perfection.
Oh, absolutely. The person who just critiques from the sidelines.
Right. The passive idealist refuses to engage with the dirt and compromise of reality, which suffocates the active builder. Cain literally cannot breathe in a world dominated by a vapor. So, Cain strikes out. He kills Abel not out of petty malice, but in a violent attempt to smash the mirror that is reflecting his own density back in him.
But there is a massive, tragic irony to how Levi interprets the outcome of that strike, isn't there?
A profound irony. By spilling Abel's blood into the dirt, and it's worth noting the Hebrew word for blood, dam, shares a root with Adama, the red clay of the earth.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So by spilling that blood, Cain permanently anchors his brother's vaporous essence into material reality. By trying to eliminate the passive force, the active force becomes eternally haunted by it.
Because Cain wanted liberation to just keep building, but he becomes the guardian of his brother's memory instead.
Exactly. The astral light is a perfect recording medium. It remembers every single blow and balances the equation.
Okay, wait, let me pause you here. Because if Cain's raw kinetic aggression was a cosmic mistake that left him haunted and cursed to wander, is Levi saying the goal is to be perfectly behaved and passive like Abel? Like, are we just supposed to sit around being vapor so we don't accidentally anchor a curse to ourselves?
Not in the slightest. The passive vapor is just as incomplete as the striking spear.
Okay.
To show how a person actually masters this tension, Levi swaps out the tragic character of Cain for the New Testament character of the prodigal son. Think about the prodigal son. He takes his inheritance, goes out into the messy world, and completely squanders it in the material mire. He makes terrible choices and hits absolute rock bottom.
Yeah, he suffers immensely from his own active mistakes.
But in the esoteric tradition, that suffering is not a moral failure that stains his soul forever. It is a structural necessity.
Really? A necessity?
Yes. Hitting rock bottom is the psychological equivalent of the alchemical process, solve, et coagula, dissolve, and congeal. The son has to descend into the shadow world and endure the brutal breaking down of his ego. When he finally returns home, the father doesn't forgive him out of some sentimental, emotional whim. He forgives him because the son has completed the circuit of the great work.
Oh, wow.
He went out into the harsh reality, generated friction, broke down, and rebuilt himself. He returns to the source not as a naive, untested innocent like Abel, but as a true initiate who understands the weight of the material world.
Let's bring this down to earth for a second. If the universe doesn't punish us for our quote-unquote sins in a vindictive way, but rather uses those failures as a brutal teaching tool to rebuild us, how does the cosmos actually govern itself? Like, if there's no angry guy sitting on a cloud with a clipboard tallying our mistakes, what is managing this system?
It comes down to a dynamic, automated tension between two fundamental Kabbalistic forces, Chesed and Gevurah.
For those listening who might be unfamiliar with the Kabbalistic tree of life, how do these two forces operate?
So, Gevurah translates to strict contractive severity. It is absolute justice. It is geometric, uncompromising, and unyielding.
Okay.
Chesed, on the other hand, is expansive, liquid grace. It is mercy. And Levi makes a fascinating observation about how these forces interact with humanity. He states that the cosmic intelligence administers justice to the just and mercy to the sinner.
Which, again, sounds completely backward to how we normally think about it. You'd think the person who did everything right gets the mercy as a reward, and the sinner gets hit with the harsh justice.
It sounds backward until you look at it as structural engineering instead of a courtroom.
Structural engineering. Okay, explain that.
The just person is someone who has done the incredibly hard work to build a structurally sound, highly disciplined internal vessel. Because they have built a strong container, they are capable of receiving the hard, unyielding light of Gevurah's strict justice without breaking.
So their internal architecture can handle the high voltage of absolute truth.
Exactly. But the sinner can't handle that voltage. If you trace the word sinner back to its Greek root, hamartia, it literally means missing the mark or making an error in calculation.
Missing the mark. Okay.
So a sinner in this context is someone whose internal vessel is currently broken, scattered, or misaligned, kind of like the prodigal son at rock bottom.
Yeah.
If the universe applied strict, unyielding geometric justice to a broken vessel, it would instantly shatter into oblivion. The circuit would blow.
So mercy isn't a reward at all.
No, mercy isn't an emotional lapse in judgment from the universe. It's a systemic compensation. The cosmic intelligence floods the deficiency with Chi's expansive grace to restore equilibrium.
Wow.
It gives the broken vessel the space and the padding it needs to rebuild its structure without being destroyed by the raw truth of its own failure.
That structural accommodation actually reminds me of how Levy talks about the difference between truth and fiction. He argues that supreme reason, the absolute raw, unfiltered truth of the universe, requires doctrine just to communicate with our finite biological brains.
Yes, the blinding, raw current of reality would literally fry our nervous systems if we experienced it directly. So the truth must clothe itself in fiction.
And we should probably clarify his use of that word.
Yeah, he doesn't mean a lie or a deception. He's pulling from the Latin root finger, which means to mold or to shape out of clay.
Right.
Doctrines, religious symbols, and esoteric rituals are the necessary molded plastic mediums through which the blinding truth projects itself safely into our material world.
It's like looking at a solar eclipse. The raw truth of the universe is the blazing sun. If you stare directly at it, it will literally burn out your retinas. Doctrine, rituals, and symbols, the fictions Levy is talking about, are the shaded eclipse glasses you have to put on just to safely observe the reality of the sun without going blind.
That is the exact dynamic. And the
Oh.
true adept, the Magus, operates in the tension between the pure spirit and the molded form.
Yeah.
They know that clinging too tightly to literal doctrines, worshiping the eclipse glasses themselves, traps you in dogma.
Right, you're missing the point.
But abandoning the glasses entirely and staring at the sun leaves you ungrounded and functionally blind. You need the molded fictions, but you must always remember you are using them to look at the light behind them.
Okay, so if the universe gives us these shaded glasses to view the absolute safely, and it dynamically balances strict justice with expansive mercy to keep our fragile vessels from shattering, what is the one thing the cosmos absolutely will not tolerate?
Mediocrity. The ultimate unforgivable offense in Lavu's system is being lukewarm.
He actually pulls a quote straight from the book of Revelation for this, right?
Correct.
Revelation 3.14, I think.
Yes, where the divine master speaks to the church and says, I wish you were either entirely hot or entirely cold because the lukewarm make me sick. He literally says, I will spit you out of my mouth.
Wow.
Levy takes this famous biblical verse and completely strips it of its religious guilt, applying it directly to the physics of the astral light.
So it's about voltage over virtue.
Exactly. For the Magus, heat is the solar sulfurous drive to create, to push forward, to conquer, and even to destroy. Cold is the icy lunar power of absolute restraint. It is the power to stand still and say no to the chaos.
Okay.
Both of these extremes, intense heat and intense cold, provide massive voltage to the cosmic battery.
He even makes this really controversial claim that a terrible, destructive criminal can be saved more easily than a boring, tepid person who never does anything wrong.
Because a criminal who is burning with misdirected heat still has the engine running at full blast. The fuel is in the lines. The fire is lit. Yes, they are driving 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction, but a roaring fire can be redirected by a skilled operator.
You just have to turn the steering wheel.
Right. But the lukewarm person, the tepid, mediocre soul who plays it safe in the comfortable middle just to avoid making waves, they have no momentum. They leave no scratch on the astral canvas. In a universe powered by friction, they are a dead wire. They short-circuit the entire system.
Hold on, wait. You're losing me a bit here. We just spent 20 minutes talking about the beauty of equilibrium. We talked about balancing the bicycle. We talked about standing perfectly balanced between the two pillars of love and wrath, using the staff to hold the center. Now you're telling me Levy says the middle is lukewarm and makes the universe sick. Which is it? Are we balancing in the middle or are we being extreme?
It's a brilliant distinction to make, honestly, because it sounds like a contradiction until you understand the difference between capacity and position.
Okay.
Levy isn't telling you to pick one pole, be only a raging fire or only an ice block and live there forever. That's just being unbalanced. He's saying you must have the capacity for extreme voltage.
It's about how much current you can hold.
Exactly. The true sovereign magician doesn't choose a side in the cosmic war. They choose the center. They stand dead center where the violent currents of love and wrath collide.
Right.
But to stand in the center of a hurricane, You must be able to hold the extreme tension of both forces without flinching. If you are lukewarm, you don't have the internal strength to hold the pillars. The moment you step into the center, the opposing forces just sweep you away.
So the middle isn't safe at all.
No. You must be capable of absolute fiery action and absolute icy restraint, utilizing both of them dynamically to bend the plastic medium of reality. The middle isn't a place of passive safety. It is the most intense, high-voltage place you can stand.
Okay, let's bring this all together for you, the listener, because this is a massive shift in how to view the world. We've completely dismantled the idea of a gentle, cooperative, rule-following universe today. We've replaced it with a dynamic, roaring engine that is powered entirely by antagonism and friction.
A universe where resistance isn't a punishment, but a requirement for life.
Right. We learned the math of the Sphinx, how the dense, physical world of four is driven by the polarized tension of two, and can only be mastered by the conscious, balancing will of the three. We explored why Cain's raw, active force was paralyzed by Abel's passive vapor, and how suffering and hitting rock bottom is the necessary alchemical crucible for the prodigal son.
Yeah.
We saw why the universe floods broken vessels with mercy so they can rebuild, and finally why it demands extreme voltage and capacity over tepid mediocrity.
The practical relevance here is profound for anyone trying to navigate life. The true magus, the sovereign individual, doesn't waste their energy trying to destroy the quote-unquote bad guys or eliminate conflict from their world. They know conflict is the battery.
They're the engineer in the control room.
Exactly. They master the equilibrium, balancing the fire and the ice to bend reality to their will rather than being bent by it.
Which leaves us with one final lingering question for you to mull over as you go about your rant. We started by talking about how this behavioral physics demands friction to survive. If this astral light is a real electromagnetic ether that records every single impulse of your human desire, and if playing it safe in the lukewarm middle only short-circuits the cosmic battery, what kind of energetic voltage is your daily routine currently projecting? Are you actively tensioning the wire of your own life, generating the intense friction needed to create your reality? Or are you just slowly, quietly evaporating in the comfortable shadows of the undecided?
Standing in the doorway, one foot in the flame, one inside the winter where nobody changed. Heartbeat on a wire, static in my veins, living like a ghost that never